Good afternoon to everyone who is attending workshop number 2 in the grant writing workshop series. My name is Paul Cavanaugh, and I'm a grant specialist with the Center for Engagement, Environmental Justice and Health. The name of this workshop is Grant Proposal Development. And I'm very fortunate to be joined by my colleague from the Environmental Finance Center, another component of the University of Maryland, Modesta Burrian. So
Hi.
Modesta, take it away.
All right. Good afternoon and welcome, everyone. My name, as Paul said, is Modesta Burian, and I am the Assistant Director at the Environmental Finance Center at the University of Maryland. I've been with the center about 12 years now and have been heavily involved with grants and grant writing during that time. So if you don't know about EFC, I'll give you just a little bit of background. We are one of 29 environmental finance centers across the country that helps provide communities with solutions to manage the cost of environmental protection programs and activities. So we work on multimedia issues, including water infrastructure and energy and climate justice. We have a few regional programs, one being our regional water TA program. And we're also part of, which you probably heard at the workshop several times, the Mid-Atlantic Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Centers, which is affectionately termed as TCTAC. We're also part of the MATCH, the Climate Justice Hubs, and a few other programs funded by Inflation Reduction Act and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. So through that, we are charged with providing these resources and technical assistance services like this grant workshop today to help underserved and overburdened, so frontline, fence line communities throughout the Mid-Atlantic region address local water infrastructure, environmental and energy justice issues. So we are very much aligned with that government-wide commitment to advancing environmental justice through the Justice 40 initiative. So specifically through these programs, we're working to connect and build the capacity of communities and our community hub partners to find and access funding. So that's federal funding, but also state and philanthropic funding. So that's why we're here today to talk to you about grant writing and the proposal development process. Okay, some learning objectives for today. There's some key elements in a grant proposal that you're going to want to strategically and thoughtfully include to position yourself for success. So this session is going to cover some of those key elements. We're going to talk about common elements of a grant proposal, differences between goals and objectives, differences between outputs and outcomes that can get people tripped up a little sometimes. We're going to briefly review like milestone schedules and project timelines, basic components of a logic model, how to develop a performance measurement plan, and tips on budget and budget justification. And then we're going to end with the topic of letters of support versus letters of commitment. So since we are virtual and not in person today, just want to really encourage you to participate. I know it's more difficult online, but please post any questions or comments you may have in the chat. We're going to take breaks periodically, to gather your feedback and answer any questions you may have. Okay, getting prepared. So if you were in workshop 1 this morning, this is going to be a review for you. So bear with me, check your email if you need to, and then come right back to us. But I'm going to go through this slide quickly in case there are participants who weren't able to join us this morning. So touching on a few things you can do in advance before you even find a funding opportunity. There are things that you can do just to get ready and to make the process go quicker and smoother later. The first is putting together your qualifications. So this is going to include a short organizational history. So you're going to want to include here your mission, your values, how long you've been in business, the audiences you serve, the issues you address, or any other thing you'd like a funder to know about you. This is really a chance for the funder to get to know you and your great work. Also, you can go ahead and pull together short bios for all your team members. So then you can just pick and choose based on who's going to be on the project and any known partners that you typically include. So this is really about what experience, skills, maybe even educational background they bring to the table. Only need a few sentences here, and there's certainly plenty of examples out there. Another thing you can do ahead of time is pull your resumes together for all your team members. So depending upon the opportunity, I usually recommend a shorter, like 1 to 2 page resume. And also you want to get those in the same format if you have time ahead. So you often have to package your resumes into one PDF document to upload. So you ideally want that consistent look and feel. This is something you can even get an intern to work on. Now, is this going to make or break you if you already have a solid project? No, but a polished look and feel, consistent polished look and feel can certainly put you over the edge. Finally, experience in doing the kind of work that your organization is good at or that your project entails. Like, have you done similar work before? So it's good to have summaries, like 1 paragraph summary of each of your projects. That way, when a funding opportunity does come along, you can just pick and choose which one of those are most relevant and highlight those. Next is your past performance. So this section is really going to be about your success in applying for and managing grants. Funders want to see that you have the capacity to manage a grant once it's in the door. So this is about how well you've done similar work. So you want that funder to be confident that you know how to do the work and that you have done it before with success. So here you want to pick examples that are similar and relevant to the work that you are proposing. And you can tailor it later, but just having a draft of this will certainly help you get prepared. Here you also want to use metrics if possible as proof. You know, did you meet your objectives, your deliverables? Did you meet reporting deadlines? Did you achieve your objectives? So it's a good idea to compile start and end dates, you know, who the funder was, the funding amount, and et cetera for each of the project, as that's often information you'll need to include in your past performance that that the funding opportunity requests. All right, next slide. Common proposal elements. Okay, looks like we lost Paul. Hopefully he will come back because I'll be passing the baton to him here shortly. Okay, so here is an overview of some common elements required in a proposal. We're going to go through each one by one in subsequent slides. So we're going to talk about the title, the abstract, the narrative, and you can see some of the components commonly included in the narrative, budget and budget justification, evaluation, and communications and dissemination plan. Okay, starting off with your title and abstract. Title, first impressions matter. So your title should offer a brief and clear summary of your proposal. And really you want to capture your reviewer's attention here. It's the first thing your reviewer is going to see. So you want to try to make it catchy if you can. Next up is the abstract. So this is a chance to explain your catchy title. So be compelling. The abstract is what makes the reviewer want to learn more about your proposal. So keep that in mind. Defining your problem. You need to clearly define your problem in your abstract. Again, from workshop 1, you want to tie this to your funding agency's priorities. Your statement of the problem or your need, that is the whole reason behind your proposal. So I would argue that this could be one of the single most important parts of the proposal that influences funding success. Your problem statement, specifies the conditions that you and hopefully your funder wish to change. Again, it should be supported by evidence drawn from your experience. So you can build on your past performance here, pull from that. We talked about that in workshop 1. And ideally, you want to include some statistics here as well from trusted sources. Don't assume that everybody sees the problem as clearly as you do. Even if you think it's obvious, your reviewers want to know that you can clearly explain it. And
Modesta, can you look at the chat? There's a question in the chat.
Sure. I'm glad to see you're back, Paul. What's the best practice in differentiating between grants you were subcontracted to work on rather than being primary? Paul, are you understanding that question?
I believe that the individual is asking, what is the difference between being a primary on a grant and being a subawardee?
Okay, then, well, a primary, you are the one responsible for submitting the proposal, your organization. So your organization has to meet the eligibility requirements that are outlined in the proposal. So, it could be, might require you to be a 501c3 or, a university. Those are 2 examples. So in that case, if you are a nonprofit, then you will be looking for a university or a local government to partner with. You can be, that's an opportunity. Paul and I were just talking about that. Being a subawardee on grants is, really a wonderful opportunity, especially if you are strapped for staff and resources. Paul, would you like to add to that question?
Yes, first of all, I would like to say that SIEGE and EFC are in separate schools in the University of Maryland. SIEGE is in the School of Public Health, and EFC, where Modesta works, is in the School of Architecture. We're 2 separate entities. They are not a sub-entity of SIEGE, and SIEGE is not a sub-entity of EFC, but we often are sub-awardees on each other's grants. And we do that because that impresses funders when we can leverage the expertise of what the personnel at EFC do, and the people at EFC can leverage what expertise SIEGE has. It shows that there's synergy between our 2 organizations. And so that's one part of the answer. The second part is, if you are a subawardee or a subcontractor in a grant, you are only responsible for what you contract for. So for instance, the EFC is a subawardee of a number of grants that Dr. Wilson has had funded. And they have a separate budget, they have a separate budget justification, they have a separate work plan, but that is all they are responsible for doing and budgeting. Is that sort of summary?
Yes, Paul, there was a clarifying comment that was just posted. Regarding the issues proving financial management capabilities if you are a subawardee versus a primary.
Well, I would say that that's where, when you describe who you are and what your experience has been, that you can describe your previous financial grant management experience. I mean, if some primary grant proposer has chosen you to be a subawardee, then they must believe that you have the capability of carrying out what they want you to do as part of the grant.
And yeah, you still have to manage those funds. So I believe that even if you are a subawardee, that is an important thing to include in your experience, because you still have to demonstrate, you have the financial capability to manage that subaward. Oh, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Did I interrupt you?
No, you didn't.
Okay.
No, I just wanted to make sure that we completely answered the question, which, looking at the comments, I believe we have. So
great. Yeah, keep the comments coming, please. Comments and questions. We certainly welcome them. Okay, I believe I got through the problem statement and the importance of that. Next, in your abstract, so we're going back, we're talking about an abstract now. You want to clearly explain how your solution will address the problem. So we're going to talk about that some more later. Something that I didn't include here, and I'm not going to focus on it much, is that, and I believe I was watching a grant workshop earlier in the week, and they did touch on this. But you can also form your elevator pitch from your abstract. So the elevator pitch is just going to be a succinct and direct, 30-second, 3 to 5 sentences description that has an emotional connection. You just kind of want to have that in your back pocket when you're talking about your project idea, be it to a potential funder or another partner. Again, I'm not going to focus on that, but the elevator pitch, is an important thing to consider, and you can help build that through your abstract. Okay, next slide. We wanted to include just an example. So here is an example of a project that EFC did with the Maryland Black mayors a few years ago. So the project was funded, and it has resulted in a couple more rounds of funding to do a phase 2 to actually install some residential BMP. So just wanted to provide examples. So, okay, let's start with the title. Getting the most for Maryland Black mayors. So we talked about wanting a catchy title. In this case, MOST is an acronym for the Municipal Online Stormwater Training Program. We felt this was catchy because it was serving 2 purposes. So first, it refers to, in this case, a known training program that was already known by the funder, so they knew what MOST was. And as well as, it served as an adjective or a descriptor that the project will maximize what we can do for this target audience. The full abstract was a little longer than what I could show on this slide, but this shows some of the key elements. So let me read through it. So the Maryland Black Mayors request funds to launch the Getting the Most for Maryland Black Mayors program, representing African American mayors that serve residents in 16 municipalities across Prince George's County. 100% of MBM leaders surveyed identified a lack of environmental-related education and outreach programs targeted to their elected leaders and municipal staff. So, problem. 100% of leaders surveyed identified a lack of education, programs targeted to them. It used a statistic. In this case, it was original research from a survey of MBM leaders. This results in a disproportionate lack of resources that could be utilized to decrease pollution and improve public health in these underserved and overburdened communities. Urgency. There's a disproportionate number of resources going to these communities that could be utilized to decrease pollution, improve public health, and bring resources back to these communities. So I believe the abstract went on to state some more statistics and data about pollution and health problems in these target communities. So again, urgency. And then solution. It gives specifics on how the problem is going to be solved. So we're using in-person workshops, courses, peer-to-peer discussion forums, and matchmaking with local environmental groups to increase the understanding of these issues. So stormwater, flooding, the impacts of flooding that happen in communities, and the purpose of the county stormwater fee, and all the other community benefits that can result from these projects. So, clear stated solution, a little wordy, but I was just trying to give an example of, each of the components that we just talked about.
Can I just say quickly, Modesta, why I like this example?
Yes, sir.
I really, really strongly believe that abstracts should be a summary of the narrative.
Okay.
And I really, really believe that the title should be a summary of the abstract. Mm-hmm. And really, this abstract really summarizes the proposal. And so as a former grant reviewer, I'm able to understand up front what I'm going to read. So this is really an excellent, I believe, preparation for me to understand what it is that I'm about to evaluate. So I really think this is an excellent example. Thank you, Modesta.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that evaluator's perspective, Paul. Okay, so next we're going to move on to goals versus objectives. So a goal. So goal is going to be your broad statement. And really a goal can, in some ways, be the flip side of a problem statement. So it's a broad, high-level statement about the long-term expectations of what should happen as a result of your project. So the overarching aim of the project. Now, objectives are going to support your goals. You're going to be more specific in your objectives. They lay out the framework or the specific activities for what's going to be accomplished. Okay? So reviewers will be carefully reviewing your objectives. So it's really important that you state them clearly. So you may have heard this term, but when you write objectives, you may have heard of the acronym SMART, writing SMART objectives. So SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. Specific, so it's going to indicate precisely what you intend to do or change. You can use action words here. Measurable. How can project success be measured or evaluated? Use metrics here or data targets. Achievable. Make sure the objective is within your scope of capabilities and within the time frame. Is it possible to even accomplish this? Is it attainable? Realistic. Is the objective practical? Indicate how each objective is a real solution to a real problem. And finally, time-bound. Time-bound is really important. What's the time frame in which the problem will be addressed? State when you're going to be able to get it done. So be specific on the date or the time frame. It could be, a month, or it could be by the end of the project period or some other time frame, but that is important to include. So you want each of your objectives to meet at least some of these criteria. It's difficult to have all objectives to meet all of these criteria, but at minimum, I think it needs to be clear and specific. Some other tips for your objectives section. You want to list your objectives in no more than 1 or 2 sentences each. And I actually like to, I don't know about you, Paul, but I like to kind of list them in order of importance as well. Approximate order of importance.
Putting the most important goals and objectives first, I think, is always the smartest way to go. In fact, I was gonna ask you, how many goals do you think are best to have in a proposal?
Goals or objectives?
Goals. This is very subjective, I know. But.
Okay. I like to have pretty few goals. No more than 3.
Well, that's my preference also, because that keeps the proposal realistic, I think.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of, I'm sorry, go ahead.
And more focused.
Yes. And then I would even go on to say, in terms of objectives under each goal, I like to keep those pretty tight as well. I'm just throwing out a number like 5. But I mean, we're just, giving broad statements here. And this is a personal preference, but as Paul stated, it just keeps a tighter, more succinct proposal.
Well, and I think also that the more focused the goals and objectives can be, the easier it is for the reader to understand what is really most important for you. And if you state too many goals or too many objectives, it's like you've gone on a fishing trip or you're using a machine gun to try to cover all the territory. And I think that weakens the proposal. So the fewer goals and the better.
I would agree.
Dr. Wilson used to say that it hurts for him to have more than 3 goals.
I would agree with that. I really would. Okay, hopefully that was a clear description of the difference between goals versus objectives. We're going to go on now to an example. So this is for the project that I introduced before. So the goal, getting the most for Maryland Black mayors, will provide watershed-based education and training for MBM elected leaders and municipal staff. So that's a broad statement about the overall outcome we're hoping to achieve. Here's one of the objectives. By the end of the project, time-bound, elected officials and staff in at least 10 participating MBM communities, that's specific and achievable. If you recall from our abstract, there were 16 MBM communities and we're striving for 10 to participate. We're not striving for 100%. Our goal is to at least 10. So these elected officials and staff will have an increased understanding. So, we go on to say this increase in knowledge or understanding that's going to be measured by a pre-post survey. So that's measurable. It'd be even better if we could include a percentage. So increased understanding of the value of addressing stormwater management, participating in the county's clean water program, and how to better connect constituents with funding opportunities and resources. So a change in these things is going to indicate success. Your objective section indicates precisely what you intend to change through your project and what you would accept as proof of project success. Also, I would say that your objectives really are the basis of your evaluation section. So if you write some good objectives in precise, measurable terms, when you get to the evaluation section, it's going to be cake because you know exactly what will be evaluated. Would you agree with that statement, Paul?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the way that you've written this objective, I mean, it's going to fit perfectly into a logic model. And it's going to fit perfectly into any type of request by the funder for a performance measurement plan. So, I mean, by writing the objective in this way, you've it's doing triple work all at once.
That's what we want, efficiency. Okay, next slide. Outputs versus outcomes. So this can be a tricky distinction sometimes, but it's really not. It's really not. In the world of grant writing, outputs and outcomes are certainly related to one another, but they're very distinct. So knowing how to apply them can really benefit you in your grant writing efforts. So let's start with outputs. Outputs are the things that you will be doing. So outputs are your tasks or your activities to be conducted. So examples, could include you're going to hold a workshop or a symposium or an event. services that are going to be delivered, products, resources, like maybe you're developing a curriculum or any materials that will be developed. Maybe you're facilitating meetings. So the activities to be accomplished. Outcomes, on the other hand, are going to specify the change that will happen as a result of the program. So what is specifically going to be accomplished? So this is going to be benefits that will be produced as a result of your outputs. What impacts will those activities have? So, for example, participants in a program may increase their knowledge on an issue. Like go back to the NBM example. Was it increased knowledge? They could learn a new skill, or you could be looking for a behavior change. So there can be short-term, medium, or long-term reaching impacts. In general, the most desired outcomes are going to be those that have more of a long-term or far-reaching impact, but those are often need a lot more time and resources than can be offered in, a funding opportunity you may be looking at. So examples of some short-term outcomes: knowledge, attitude, skills. Kind of medium level, I would say, behaviors, decision-making, and then long-term impacts might be something more like a policy change or improved community health or safety, or, a change in environmental quality or circumstances. So those are some examples of outputs versus outcomes. Oh, here is going back to Maryland Black Mayor's project. Here is an example. So some of our outputs for this project: we facilitated an in-person kickoff event. That's where we got everybody on, the same page, and went over our goals and priorities for the program. We also developed a 4-course curriculum on stormwater management and flooding. We facilitated bi-weekly peer-to-peer discussion forums. We learned from our partners that, this audience really gained a lot from talking to their peers. So this was a really important component of this project. Developed stormwater action plans for each community. So again, activities that occurred with this program, your outputs. The outcomes for this were mostly short-term based. This was a year, I think it was a year project timeline. So we really focused here on increased knowledge, awareness, and skills. So your funder wants to see results and know how grant applicants will reach them. They also want to know that these tasks and activities will have a high likelihood of being successful and meeting realistic and meaningful results. So again, outputs and outcomes are important in the grant writing process. Okay, any questions? I think that's a good place to stop to see if we have any questions. Please put any comments or questions, anything that you'd like clarified in the chat. We'd love to hear from you.
Could I just say to those attending, this workshop does not contain every detail related to grant development, but we worked closely to strategize and think about the things and the concepts that sometimes become barriers to early stage grant writers, grant developers, or that might intimidate them. Mm-hmm. And that's why Modesta spent so much time on outcomes and outputs and outcomes, because that's in goals and objectives. Those are 4 concepts that people sometimes find intimidating or become barriers to them understanding how to proceed. And so I just wanted to clarify that and bring that to people's attention.
Thank you for that, Paul. Next, we're going to briefly talk about a milestone schedule. So this is a list of activities or tasks and the dates which they are scheduled to be completed. It can be a useful tool to make sure that what you're proposing is actually feasible and doable within the timeline. It's also a tool that funders like to see that can be used to track progress and keep projects on track. You can see some other points about it here. It acknowledges where multiple timelines may intersect, signifies transitions in project development, and your milestone schedules should certainly support and supplement your project activities or your outputs section. And really, at the end of the day, it just demonstrates that you've thought through the steps that each step it's going to take to achieve your outputs and outcomes. I like to put this in a table, so I would, recommend that when you put your milestone schedule together, it's just in a clear table that's included in your work plan narrative. Okay, we have a question. What if you have no past performance? Do you have advice for convincing the funder that your group can carry out the proposal?
My question, Modesta, is by no past performance, does that mean that the organization is brand new?
I know, James, can you clarify that? So let's say that it is Paul. How would you answer that question? I mean, you got to start somewhere, right?
Yeah, I would. Okay, so it is brand new. I would just really emphasize the qualifications and the credentials of the people who are going to be working together. And if they have no past, if the organization has no past, maybe the individuals do have a past. Okay. Working outside the group, or maybe they're going to be collaborating with a group that does have a past. And so they're going to be mentored, or they're going to be collaborating with a group that has been successful in carrying out certain projects. I think it's an excellent question for how new groups need to position themselves and to explain how they're going to move forward. And if it's a new group, what assets do they have? You know what I mean? I mean, are they in someone else's space? Like there are so many workspaces that you can rent these days, or do they have their own workspace? I think it's even if the organization is new, it must have assets. The internet, computers, people who know how to think about putting together a proposal. I mean, that would be my initial response. I mean, the EFC has worked with organizations from zero, who start from zero. So I would like to hear from you, about how you worked with organizations that had no past.
No, I mean, I think I'll just reiterate a few things that you mentioned, being, asset mapping. What are your assets? I'm sure you have plenty. Having created a new organization, even though it's a new organization, as Paul mentioned, your team's going to have a past history. They're going to have skills and experience they're bringing to the table. So you just really got to build upon that. Also, importance of partners. Yeah, can't stress that enough. if you missed workshop 1 this morning, we talked quite a bit about what partners can bring to the table. So I would imagine that could go a long way. Having an experienced partner with a past performance could really help you stand out as well. I hope that was helpful, James. Thank you for the question.
The last thing I would like to add, Modessa, is that one thing I always challenge groups to think about seriously is how innovative they are.
Mm.
You know, and if this is a new group, are they going to be addressing a problem which has been very confounding? And do they have an innovative solution to the problem, which they can describe in a compelling manner?
Mm-hmm.
I worked with a faculty member one time who said that, he wanted to develop an online graduate certificate for online interpreting course. And there were several that existed in the country. But I said, well, why don't you think a step further and think about developing an online master's class in interpreting?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, why is that? And I said, because one doesn't exist in the country. This was 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So he said, wow, that's possible. I can do that. And the Department of Education went crazy
Mm-hmm.
about his proposal, even though he had never written a proposal.
Mm.
He
I
had
love it. Yeah.
He had zero track record with the Department of Education, but he had an idea,
Mm-hmm.
and he himself had all kinds of interpreting and translating credentials.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
he was going to bring on people who were unbelievably credentialed to work with him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So sometimes you can get funding starting from zero if you're addressing a problem in an innovative way for which there hasn't been a solution to this point.
Yeah, you're filling a gap,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Filling that gap. Yep.
Is that helpful, James? We'll wait.
Hopefully, yes. Okay. Here's just a quick example, getting back to our milestones schedule. You can get really complicated with this if you want. There's software, there's Gantt charts, there's all sorts of different tools to get fancy. But in my experience, you can just also be very simple. This is a simple example that we created in Word.
Can I just say,
Yes.
Modessa, that if you Google examples of milestones and timelines and everything else, you'll see a wide variety. And so whatever people are comfortable with, these are just examples.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Okay, and finally, project timeline. So this is a graphic representation of the events in chronological order. Again, a visual representation of your project's duration, milestone, and outputs. So again, another useful tool to make sure what you're proposing is actually feasible and doable within the timeline. You can see where your busy months are going to be and where you might really need to ramp up your team. I've actually done this before in the proposal process and realized, oh my goodness, we have everything packed into like 3 months. This is not going to be feasible. It's not going to be doable. So I had to go back and, rethink some things and rearrange some things. So it can really be a helpful internal planning tool. And funders definitely like to see this. So a timeline is different from milestone schedule because it doesn't signify any single point in a project's history. Instead, it's really kind of showing the overall picture. Again, you can get fancy with this, but I found that simple, tables that I built with Word work just fine. Questions? Please post your questions and comments. Paul, I am going to turn it over to you to talk about logic models.
Okay. I am really a great proponent of logic models. And I really believe that the sooner an organization starts working on its logic model, even before it starts responding to an RFP, even before you even think about writing, the logic model really helps to organize your thinking. And when you present it to the funder after it's gone through several iterations, and I'm sure it will, um, it makes it very clear what you're doing. Um, I mean, it's really a map of the proposal, and the template that we're showing you is as simple a logic model as you can possibly look at. And it's very basic. It's very straightforward. I mean, if you go into the evaluation manual of the NIH Environmental Science and Health Program Evaluation Guidelines, they show you hundreds of logic models, different kinds. They all boil down to what you see in front of you on this slide. This is it. So resources are inputs. What does your organization, what do your partners and collaborators, what do you bring to the table? Even if you have no past performance, you have personnel, you have credentials, you have qualifications, you have experience. I would say this is a time for you to brainstorm. You know, when you first look at your logic model and put it together, brainstorm, just throw the kitchen sink at it, because it's always easy to edit down, and to summarize. But it's important for you to really put as much in it as you can. So all of your resources or inputs, the activities, what activities are you going to do? Again, just brainstorm. What are all the possible activities? Thinking about your goals and objectives, thinking about what you want your final outcomes to be. What activities do you want to conduct as part of your proposal? And don't pre-edit. Just put everything in there, because you'll have plenty of time to edit. Outputs. What do you think is going to happen? So if you say we're going to do a community engagement, well, our input is we have lots of people connected with vast community networks. Activities are we're going to do community engagement activities. We're going to have meetings, etc. Outputs. Well, how many people do you want to? How many organizations do you want to participate in your community engagement activities? How many individuals do you want to reach? And who is the audience for the activities? Are they young people? Are they high school people? Are they older people? Are they disabled people? Are they people in a particular neighborhood that's experiencing some type of environmental injustice? Think about who the activities are going to reach and who you want to reach. And again, keeping in mind, what are the goals and objectives of your organization? What are the short-term outcomes? Well, knowledge and awareness, that's usually the shortest term outcome. And then the intermediate outcome can be, what do you expect? How do you expect people to become engaged? Do you expect that 25% of the people, 25% of the people you reach will engage in protests, or are they willing to go through leadership programs to become more active? And then what are your long-term outcomes? And many times the long-term outcomes are changes in policy, maybe you're going to get a group of people together to complain about um, some location, some going on in your neighborhood that's polluting. So you want maybe the long-term outcome is to engage in a letter writing campaign or to get to file a civil rights complaint against the polluting entity. But it's really helpful to brainstorm right at the beginning, to start working on the logic model right away, because that'll be a great roadmap for you as you develop the proposal.
Paul,
Yeah.
I have two questions for you.
Uh,
First, and these are my questions. Do you always include a logic model in your proposals? And secondly, how do you keep it from getting, just so long? And like if you have multiple goals, if you have multiple, objectives and outputs, how do you keep it from getting so unruly and overwhelming?
well, yeah, I mean, that's a good point. Are they always required? I don't think they're always required, but I have seen that they are being required more often.
Mhm.
And I see the EPA, if not requiring them, at least strongly suggesting them. And whenever I see in an RFP that something strongly suggested,
Mhm.
I just consider that to be required.
Mhm.
But you're right. How does it become It should never be more than 1 page long, and it should always comply with the fonts, the font requirements, and um, and all of that.
Mhm.
But no, it should never go over a. But you also shouldn't put it in such tiny print that the reviewer can't see it. I think now lots of federal agencies are asking that tables uh, not have fonts lower than 10 points or something like that.
Mhm.
And I think that's the minimum, 10-point fonts.
Yeah.
But that's a good question.
Great. Thanks, Paul. You ready for the next slide?
Yes. Okay, the performance measurement plan. We put this in here because this is something that intimidates all of us, because it asks us how we are going to measure what we plan on doing, and it sort of puts the rubber to the road in that the funder is asking us to hold ourselves accountable to evaluate, to show them how we are going to evaluate what we're going to be doing. And as it says here, a performance measurement plan, which I always think of as an evaluation plan. Performance measurement plan seems too daunting. An evaluation plan seems achievable. A performance measurement plan seems too much to expect. But here we put forth 3 steps. Extract the short-term and intermediate and long-term impacts from the logic model. And I guess one thing I want to emphasize too is that all of what we've discussed so far is interlocking.
Mhm.
It's all related. They're not discrete, independent components. We're not talking about putting together a proposal where there are various silos. Everything has to relate to one another. And then how are you going to track the progress? the performance of the outputs? How are you going to evaluate whether your community meetings are successful? Well, of course, you're going to count people. You're going to say how many people were there, and you might include the results of a short survey that you've given to individuals who attend about what they've experienced. But you really have to determine upfront what you want to evaluate, or as we say in this slide, gauge, with regard to the quality and quantity of each activity. Next slide, please. Okay, step 4, we're just asking about what are you going to use? Surveys, focus groups, statistics? How are you going to evaluate the activities that you're going to be promoting? And then step 5, normally I think of this as formative evaluations and summative evaluations. Of course, you're going to track things as you go along, periodically, quarterly, etc. And I think it's good to include formative evaluations, quarterly evaluations, or quarterly performance evaluations to see if you're on track, because with some activities you will be, and some activities you might not be. And then ultimately you want to give a final evaluation of the particular activity for which you're requesting funding, so that you can evaluate, so you can determine what went well and what didn't go so well. And of course, in the logic model and in the performance and objectives, goals and objectives, you're going to state what your hope is for the activities that you carry out, and how you're going to determine whether they have been successful, and just as important, how will that evaluation be used to determine what you're going to do next to accomplish your goals and objectives. Next slide. With budget, there are a finite number of categories, and the categories that are on the slide are basically all you can ask for. There's personnel. Some of the personnel expenses will be considered salary, other wages, depending on whether a person is full-time, part-time, contracted, labor, etc. Fringe benefits will be determined by your organization, but it's important to include them in your budget considerations. Travel, we have put up what the federal government allows with regard to reimbursement, with regard to mileage reimbursement. That has been changing because as gas becomes more expensive, the GAO, the Government Accounting Office, increases the amount of money that you can request for reimbursement for travel. So it's important to consult with the GAO about that. Something that confuses people many times is equipment. Most of us think of computer equipment as being equipment. The federal government does not consider anything under $5,000 to be equipment. So computer stuff, I've stopped calling computer equipment because it's computer stuff, related stuff, will be requested under supplies and materials. Anything over $5,000 per unit is considered equipment. Contractual is any expense of any person, individual who's working on contract, just like it says. I mean, you may need a computer person to come in and install a program or maintain some computer equipment for you. Um, you may need to contract a videographer or a photographer to document the outcome of your project so that you can use that in your evaluation to demonstrate to the funder what you've been doing. So as it says, contractual expenses are just expenses for services and paid for on a per job basis. With regard to other direct costs, rent, participant incentives, etc. Sometimes it's good to talk to the program officer about what is allowable and non-allowable. For instance, alcohol and entertainment expenses are usually not allowed, and either is lobbying expenses. And then indirect costs. Institutions of education have negotiated indirect cost rates with the federal government, but most community organizations do not, and they accept 10% for indirect costs. Indirect costs are all the costs associated with staying in business, whether that's paying for office rental space, telephone, etc. Next slide, please. Okay, matching funds. There are some grants that require that the applicant puts forth a certain percentage of the funding as matching funds. And you really need to think about what the cost of your personnel is that's going to be working on the grant that you can use as matching funds, because normally personnel costs are the most significant ways that you can come up with to provide matching or in-kind examples for requesting matching funds. Would you like to say anything more about that, Modessa? I don't like to. It's a complicated subject, and you really need to look at what the applicant can put forth as far as value.
Yeah, it is a complicated subject. Again, for in-kind match, it's non-cash contributions. So a lot of times you can even use, we've used in the past volunteer hours or expert, like if you need some expert advice from a professional and they're, giving of their time in that way, you can use that time as match. Again, loans or donated, equipment or supplies, all that can be used as match. But I would just encourage you to, look at the requirements of the proposal and ask funders, any questions that you may have about this. And again, even if you can put in a little cash or in kind, it just shows, as the slide says, that you've got some skin in the game.
Yeah, and I would say, some grant applicants, when they look at an RFP and they see that matching funds are required, they automatically think, oh, I can't do that. Mm-hmm. And I would suggest that instead of just automatically thinking that the requirement for matching funds disqualifies you. There are a lot of innovative ways to come up with matching funds that don't strap the organization. You know.
Yeah, there are definitely some innovative ideas. Another thing to consider, what can your partners bring to the table? A lot of times we have partners and they will, for example, say, okay, I'm not going to charge my travel costs. So they're going to keep track of all that and they're going to contribute that, as match. Things like that, it can add up. We have a question here from James. Is there a recommended percent skin in the game? For example, if you're requesting 100,000 and you only have 3,000 in matching, are you frowned upon?
Can I say something here, Medessa?
Of course.
As you know, it was announced that the Chesapeake Bay Trust received $20 million from the USDA for its urban forestry proposal.
Yesterday.
Yesterday. And Siege was, I don't know if was the EFC and a subawardee on that?
I don't believe so.
Okay. Well, Siege was, and there was a large 1-to-1 match requirement. And I know that the Chesapeake Bay Trust requested a waiver because of who the funds would benefit, low-income peoples. So instead of giving them 50 million, they gave them 20 million. And I think it was because they received a waiver. So it's pardon?
I said that's a good point.
Yeah. So it's been my experience that agencies and funders are sometimes flexible if you have a great idea and what you are proposing fits really well into the kind of projects they want to fund.
Paul, I want to bring attention to the time. It is 2:38, so we only have 7 minutes and a few more slides to cover.
Okay, well, thank you. Okay.
I'm sorry, Paul. We do have one more question I want to address.
Okay.
How does it work when the expert is providing a service at a lower rate? Do you document their fee and then the balance as in kind, or can the categories not be mixed?
Ultimately, I think that's a question for the program officer. But I have seen so many innovative ways to document in-kind contributions that it would seem to me that it would be possible to use the difference between the normal rate and the discounted rate as an in-kind contribution.
I would agree, but I think it's smart. You do want to check with the funder on that to make sure. Thank you for that question.
This is just a really simple, straightforward budget. And there are lots of examples of budgets. If you Google them, I agree with Medessa to keep things as simple as possible. That is totally understandable. Okay, with regard to budget justification, I'm not going to read the whole slide, but basically the funder wants to know how you justify how you're going to document, how you're going to describe what you need funding for. I mean, the funder knows that you're going to need money for personnel, salaries, fringe benefit, possibly travel, maybe equipment, definitely supplies, many times contracts. So the whole budget justification is it's very straightforward. And the most difficult part of putting forth the budget justification is saying, okay, 10% of our project director is going toward this project, or 10% of our CEO is going to this project, and the CEO's salary is this, so 10% of the CEO's salary is this, and 10% of the CEO's indirect fringe benefits are this. Normally, the difficulty in putting together a budget has to do with what percentage of the salary of the current personnel you're going to use. And so you just need to come up with a way to describe that. Next slide. I think sustainability is very important, and it's very important to funders. Like, how are you going to keep this project going if it needs to be kept going? If it's a project with a finite end, like your project goal is we want to plant 1,000 trees. Well, if that's your goal, and if you reach that goal, that's it. But if your goal is to plant 100 trees a year in a community for the next 20 years, how are you going to do that? It's just a really, really important part of the proposal. And I normally like to think too that if you can, it's really compelling to put something in on return on investment. Like, if you can possibly show the funder, well, you gave us $100,000, but you know what? We produced $125,000 worth of goods and services. Sustainability and return on investment are two things that are really important for you to consider. And to answer James's question, I think, James, all of the sessions are being recorded, and they're on the Siege YouTube channel. If you want the slides, I mean, they're non-proprietary. I mean, I think that
I would just email one of us. And
yeah. Why don't you email Medessa? She's the
absolutely.
Okay. I'm not going to read the whole slide again, but let me.
Yeah, we have 1 minute, Paul. I want to be respectful of people's time. If you just want to quickly go over the difference here.
Letters of commitment are 100 times better than letters of support because they contain information about what participants are actually going to do to contribute to the project. And the big advantage of letters of commitment is that you can take the content of the letters of commitment and put them in the budget justification, and you can put them in the narrative. And so letters of commitment can really serve three purposes. Next. What are your tips and tricks? You have exactly 55 seconds to tell us. Sorry about that.
And I will say, James, the slides are, when I downloaded into this platform, the formatting got messed up. So the slides actually are supposed to look a little bit better than this. Anything else you want to share before we close? While we wait, I just want to say it's been a pleasure being with you this afternoon. We hope that we can do some, we will do some in-person workshops in the future. So please check CEGE's website as well as the TCTAC website. And Paul, it's been a pleasure.
Yes, well, I would just like to end by saying that we showed you, we gave you our contact information because we are obligated, having received the money from the EPA that we've received, we're obligated to provide technical assistance and grant writing support to you for free. So we encourage you to reach out to us and to continue to ask us your questions and let us know what kind of assistance we can provide to you. Because one of the goals and objectives of the funding that we've received is that we serve you. And so we really want to hear from you. And we thank you for your participation. And the third grant writing workshop is tomorrow in person. So if you want to see us live, you can do so over at the Stamp Student Union. Thank you very much, and please have a good afternoon. And thank you, Medessa. This has been wonderful.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great afternoon. Bye-bye. Enjoy the rest of the symposium.
Okay. Bye.